Okay, maybe it was just background noise that I was picking up that I couldn't make out.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Let's not have it be morning again, please.
It's not a Monday, Francisco. It's already a Thursday.
They don't run together anymore, Matt.
I know.
Hope everybody's doing good.
I'm all right here. Everybody's all right up here, except we're going to get blown down into the valley any minute now.
Hopefully
Matt.
there's a little bit of snow.
Yeah, I saw it spitting when I was driving up after lunch. So
Yeah.
as long as it's snowing up in the mountains, we're okay. I hope it snows a lot up there.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Matt, do you have a minute after this call? I have to ask you a question about a Luna Foundation matter.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Let me ask a real crazy question because it's been a few days since we were on. Did someone actually put an agenda together finally?
Yes, there's been an agenda published.
Okay.
Yes, there was an agenda and it was published. The notice was provided to the public.
And it is up on the
Darlene
website.
sent it out.
Oh, yeah, but if she sent it out when she did it 3 weeks ago, I've had 300 emails per day since then.
Hey, you
So
need
that's
to
probably-
retire, Matt, then you won't get so many.
No, and I try to unsubscribe to as many as I can, but and I don't read them all, but I have to at least read the title. But
Yeah.
about 300 a day.
Yeah.
So when I finally get a break, I start putting them in folders. I use it sort of like a file cabinet, but I almost need to be reminded the day before where the link's at. Because if I have to go find it, it's going to be about a half hour.
Yeah.
300 emails a day, Matt, means you're very popular and you should stay off the cover of People magazine.
No, I don't want to be on any magazine. Do they still make magazines? I haven't
do.
seen one.
If not the gossip ones.
Oh, and those are, first level gossip. No, I think Francisco's he's on the cover of Rolling Stone probably.
I'm on the back cover of Rolling Stone under a rock, under a real Rolling Stone.
En la sequía de la manteca, or no, is that nearby?
Arroyo de la Manteca.
Arroyo, okay. See, I knew it was there somewhere.
That's the precinct boundary, the Arroyo de la Manteca.
Runs up by Tao Street, yeah?
Yep.
But slippery when wet, huh?
It's an interesting story on how they named it that. I guess up by where the cemetery is, where the Masonic cemetery,
Yeah.
across on the other side, they had, I guess in the late 18th and 19th century, they had pigs up in there. They had a big pig farm. And so when
Wow.
they slaughter them and they make chicharrones, they dump the lard in the arroyo and it had a sheen all the way down. So that's what they called it. It was manteca. So that's what they called it. Arroyo
Wow.
de manteca.
Wow.
Yeah, they used to have matanzas there, yeah?
Well, I don't know about matanza. They used to kill a lot. I don't know if it was really a matanza as we know it.
It was just lunch.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I think everybody's here. I'll go ahead and take the roll, and I don't know, Francisco, if you want to take the lead in doing the call to order and the approval and all that stuff. So
If it's called a roll, and then we'll establish a quorum.
okay, go ahead and call the meeting to order if you want.
Okay. You have the time is 1:35. We'll call the meeting to order, I guess.
Okay, roll call. Matt Martinez,
Present.
Steven Salas, Greg Salazar,
Present.
Sandra Madrid,
Your mic's off.
She's muted.
Present.
There you.
okay,
We finally get to hear her.
yes. Christine Ludi,
Present.
Lee Einer,
Present.
and Francisco Apodaca.
Present, thank you. With that, according to the agenda, I don't know how this works in a virtual meeting, but we have a pledge of allegiance.
You can just stand up. That's what we do.
Let's, if anybody would stand, and Lee, would you lead us to the pledge?
Sure. I pledge allegiance
To
to the flag
Of
of the United States
of
of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty
and justice
justice for all.
Thank you. Now, I guess that Darlene, since we really haven't had an election of a chairperson or anything, I mean, I've been called it to order, but I think that you should take it on from the approval of minutes. We don't have any minutes yet officially, but do you want to take it into discussion?
I really don't think that I can. That's why I was saying maybe you should take the lead on it, or one of you
Okay.
could.
That's
Yeah.
How
no
about,
problem.
Francisco, how about if we just table the minutes since there aren't any?
Well, there aren't any minutes, so
take-
that's,
yes.
that's a moot point, so we don't have, we can dispense with that item right now, since we don't have any minutes, we haven't officially met to really constitute anything close to minutes. So with that, can I have a motion for the approval of the agenda as presented, the amended approval agenda with the exclusion of the approval of minutes?
I
moved.
move.
So moved by Mr. Reiner, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Okay. Is Greg Salazar, Christina Lee at the same time. So we have a motion and a second for the approval of the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed by the same motion, no opposition, so the motion carries. With that, do we have, I don't see any members of the public, even though this was noticed. So I think we can dispense with public input unless at this point, prior to the discussion items, we have any discussion, because we're basically public right now.
Mr. Apodaca, there was no input submitted, so we asked that any public input be submitted prior to the meeting. We had a deadline of yesterday by 3, so they would submit that to myself or to Scott.
Well, we'll dispense of that item since there's no public input, and we'll move on to that section of the agenda. Item 7, discussion items. The first one is election of a chair. I open up the floor to nominations for those for election of a chairperson.
I move
I
that
nominate
Francisco.
Apodaca
Uh,
as chair.
Do we have a motion? What, can I take one as a motion, one as a second? Mr. Reiner, I believe Matt was first. Mr. Reiner, you were second. Would you like to second
If I was the
that?
second, then I will second Matt's motion.
Thank you.
We have, okay. Any other nominations?
A motion that nominations cease.
Could I have a second to the motion to nominate, cessation of nominations?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to cease nominations. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. No opposition, motion carries. Nominations cease. And Election of a chairperson. Is there one person?
Make a motion to nominate Greg Salazar.
As vice chair.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion by Christine Ludi and a second by Lee Einer to nominate Greg Salazar as vice chairman. All those in favor? Any other nominations? With that, I call for a vote. All those in favor of Greg Salazar as vice chairman, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those
Thank you.
opposed? No opposition. Congratulations, Greg.
Thank you.
Congratulations, both of you.
Other officers is needed. Let's have a discussion on this. Do we need another officer? Darlene?
Yes, sir.
I would take it then that you are acting as secretary for recording the minutes and the preparation and dissemination of agendas.
If that is the pleasure of the board, yes, sir. I will serve as secretary.
Thank you.
So I make that motion to have Darlene take the minutes of our meetings
I
as
will
a
second that.
representative of the city.
Can I have let me see if I can amend that motion to have Darlene act as secretary to include minutes and that way she can do everything else besides the minutes.
Yes.
Can I have a
I make
second
that
on that
motion.
amendment? Can I have a second on the amendment of the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, any other discussion on Darlene? If not, can I call for a vote of confidence for Darlene? All those in favor of Darlene acting as secretary for the commission, signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Ayes have it. Darlene, I don't know whether to say congratulations or I'm sorry.
I'll take them both.
Are there any other officers that the commission may deem necessary at this time? I can't think of any. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? If not, we'll dispense with that, and I think we've filled those positions as officers and administration of the commission. The next item, discussion item, would be the analysis of charter language. And Darlene, we had asked last time if there was how the members were appointed, and if we fulfilled the obligations or the mandate of the charter that there should be some appointments by council, mayor, and municipal judge. Do you know how they were appointed, Darlene?
I'm not exactly sure, but I'm sure that they followed what was in the charter.
Okay. Discussion on that. Lee, do you have anything on that?
I would exercise a rebuttable presumption that everything was done according to Hoyle. I have no reason to believe otherwise.
Because that question was raised as far as the charter goes and discussion of charter. I know that was an item that we had talked, that was brought forth at the last time we met, although it was unofficial, there was an unofficial question for that. So if we're comfortable in the appointments that we met the provisions of the charter, are there any other discussion as to the charter language at this point?
Yes, on 2 points. First of all, for clarification, the issue that I raised at the last meeting was conflict between our bylaws and the city charter. I was not questioning the process of the appointment of any of us present.
And I believe those have been amended. Darlene sent an amendment to the bylaws. And I was comparing the ones that were first sent to these ones, and it does it matches now.
Very good. And the other thing that I would suggest, if we're going to review, well, it's our job, it's all we do, is review the existing charter, is that we start with section 105, because that describes the process that we're involved in and our duties and responsibilities. And if we don't begin with that, we won't know what we're doing going forward, if that makes sense.
Well, that would define the mission the way that I see it. If that is the purpose and the reason that we're here is to abide by the charter, and what we're appointed to do is basically establishing our mission of a review of the charter, and then to bring forth and recommend amendments to the charter that would then go to the council for approval, and then to the voters at the next general election to approve the amendments to the charter.
Right, or an alternative process is by petition, which actually bypasses the governing body.
And that would be not within the purview of this body, since we were appointed to actually abide by the charter and do the review process. So we are fulfilling that, and that would be X to the petition process. So then we would move forward. Now, in order to establish some ground rules as to how we review, I mean, there's several ways we can review. We could review by, going through each of the sections, discussing if there's any necessary changes, and going by section and subsection. Have y'all had a chance to review the document to date, the present charter? Let's start that way. There's
Francisco.
Yes.
I think if we can go back a little bit, the bylaws are stating that we have to stagger our positions. There has to be a 4-year to a 2-year. I was reading that on the bylaws.
I did see that. Now,
did you see that?
That's an interesting question. Now, since we are appointed for a period of time for one reason in the review,
it's on Article, I think it's Article 5, where it says terms of service. The terms of office for regular members of the board and commission shall be 4 years staggered as provided herein. At the first meeting, the board shall determine by lot which of its members shall serve for 2 years and which will serve for 4 years, with the two categories achieving equal members as nearly as possible. The mayor shall make appointments every 2 years, subject to council approval, as provided herein for the positions whose terms have expired.
If I might interject, Section 1.05A states the governing body shall set the duration of the commission. And it uses the word shall, which indicates it's not discretionary. So I'd pose the question, has the governing body set the duration of this commission? Because that renders a lot of the other moot.
Yeah, I assumed it was only just to review the charter and not a lengthy assignment. That's what I thought.
I think that's the key here is boards and commissions. When we look at it's Article 6 in the charter. When we go to Article 6, and you look at the boards that it mentions, I don't think that we fall under a permanent board or commission. I think we were a temporary commission to only to the charter every 10 years. So I think that would render that term of service as not applicable to this particular commission.
Okay, so we're only a temporary commission to just review. Okay,
Yes.
I got you.
They're like an ad
I just
hoc.
want to make sure that we're not violating anything by that. Okay, thank you.
No, because under Article 6, they do define permanent boards, and the Board of Adjustment, the Design Review Board,
Right.
the Advisory Commission, Largest Tax Board, Campaign and Ethics Board, and Advisory Committees.
Okay,
Under that, And under the charter, we're specifically chartered only to review the charter. So I think by that definition, or by that article, section 1.5, subsection A in charter review, it basically sets what our mission is and what our term is only until we present it to
The governing body.
governing body and they adopt, and then I imagine through the election process if there's questions.
Okay,
It
got
would
it.
make sense to me, because if the public at large has questions during the process or the election period, they would come back to us for answers or to the council. Now, if the council are running, that may be a conflict in the
Yeah.
election. So they would come back to us as a body. So I would take it that our term would be from now through the election.
Okay.
Right, but that is something that the governing body
Has to determine.
assign, and they have not, to the best of my knowledge, done that in an open meeting. Darlene, is there a way we could get that on the agenda, or at least request that it be placed on the agenda so that our rules have a little more clarity?
Let me talk to city clerk and to Scott and see how we can get that on there.
Which the elections are now in November, correct? Municipality elections should be now in November. Whoever is up for election.
I don't think the city of Las Vegas.
No,
Has anybody? They don't
no,
have anybody?
no, not now, not in November.
Oh, they're not in the rotation of entities that they opt out of it. I got it.
Exactly.
Okay.
But
I thought they were in it.
But is the next election slated for March of 2022?
March of 2022?
Sandra, you have a question?
Is that when we have the next election for municipal office?
Yeah, I believe so. It's March of 2022. So the question, charter would approve in March.
So our target deadline is to probably finish everything by October or earlier, so that we can go through the process and get it ready for the next election.
Okay.
That's going to be for a couple of the councilors, I believe.
And the
not,
judge.
it's not the election for mayor and.
Okay.
It would be the next that would be considered a general election for council. So that would be the next time that we would have an opportunity to take this before the voters.
Thank you, Ito.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that said, that's our target date is prior to that.
Yeah.
And of course, we'd like to have it done well in advance of that. So we can go through the approval process of the governing body and then on to the voters. And then provide any answers to any questions that the electorate may have or others.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The last process took about a year, and we went to the council about 9 months in. They had some questions, and then they referred questions back to us. We went back and did a little more work. We presented it probably on the 11th month, and then we got it approved at that meeting, and it was ready for the next election. I think ethically, they didn't want to make any changes themselves, the council at the time. And they sent it back to us and they approved it pretty much as we presented it.
Well, that being said, the thing is what substantive changes need to be addressed within the charter in our review, the developing proper language for that process. Now, that's why I think it's pretty important to develop a process of review. How do we approach the review? If we take it section by section, there's obviously some sections that may not need any change. Those would be fairly simple. Now, those that require a change or we suggest changes for, we should have a deliberate discussions and make sure that the public is informed of those proposed changes. Because if you have buy-in by the public and you have buy-in by the council, then it's ripe for the electorate to vote. or at least have an informed electorate, if not buy-in, at least information, so that they can make a decision whether or not to change and approve the chart, those changes to charter. So,
Well,
go ahead.
Francisco, Mr. Chairman, during the last process, what we did was we finally came with the final document. We had public hearings. I don't know how many were scheduled. It was a number of them, maybe one in each ward. And don't forget, back then there was nothing virtual, so we had to literally go to each ward and have a meeting. And the public did attend, but the numbers were very light. But we got all their input, and then we went back and finished and finalized the final draft after public input and delivered it to the city council. So in other words, we didn't keep going back and forth asking for their input because we'll never finish.
Yeah, I think we have to take each question on and develop a product and then present the product at a public hearing.
Yeah.
How did you construct the public hearing process, Matt? Give us a little bit more insight to that. Was it article by article, or was it just ward by ward to present the changes?
What we did is the entire document was presented ward by ward, and we had a public hearing. And I think we actually went to different parts of the community, Ward 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we gave everybody an opportunity to give us input. And then we went back and met one more time and took the final document to the city council. But it wasn't item or article by article. It was the entire charter that was being proposed. Don't forget that we went to the city of Las Vegas is now a public, I don't know what they call that. We didn't have a home rule prior to the change.
And there's
Las Vegas is now a home rule community.
Right. And under the terms of the current charter, and this again is 1.05, this has to be put before the people one issue at a time, discreetly, unless there's a scenario where there is more than one amendment that doesn't make logical sense unless presented in conjunction with another. And I believe that is 105C8. And it does make sense to do it that way. If you present an entire document, it becomes very difficult to go through the existing charter and a proposed charter and identify every change and get, sort out the individual issues from that gestalt. There's a specific way that amendments are written. And in New Mexico, you present the passage or the portion of the legislation that you're amending. The deleted language is bracketed and struck through, and the added language is underlined. And when you do that issue by issue, it's very easy to pick up the piece of paper, read the statement of purpose at the top, look at the actual change, and understand exactly what's being done.
It would be similar to the constitutional questions that are posed in our state constitutional elections when we have a referendum. It says amending the Constitution, a proposal to amend the Constitution, and they give you the language. And then you vote for or against that constitutional amendment or the amendment to that particular work. So it'd be simple, but it would depend on how many amendments we would be bringing forth. And and personally, from my personal view of this, there may be, from what I saw of it in my review, I could see at least 3 amendments that were simple, but would have an impact on the bodies. But that would mean 3 questions. In that case, if we were to adopt a 3, so you would have 3 questions on the ballot per amendment. So that's a way that would, and Mr. Reiner, we could present it with a strike-through language, amending, and that would be proper. You know, that way they could see what the change to that particular section would be. And then for or against that amendment. That's a simple process of doing that. And that would be the presentation of the question in that format. So I think that would be the way to do it.
You can redline the changes and on the amendments, and then in either green and what it is that you're inserting with that change. That way it's very clear what is being struck out to what is being amended.
I like that.
They call it redlining.
Yeah, striking out red and green lining the proposed amendment change.
The changes.
That's simple, and because we can have ballots that are in color, because that would mean a black and white ballot with 2 extra colors, red and green, and I've seen that done. That's not a big deal. It's not an expensive process, and it's not a complicated process, and it's the most educated way to present the change.
Right.
And I think that we should go for a transparent question, and that leads to the transparency of the question, where you're showing what you're omitting, or striking, and what you're presenting. That's I think that's a great way to do it. I think that's the most logical way to do it and bring it forward. Go ahead, man.
Francisco, let me tell you that the process that we went through before. Now, don't forget, it's been 20 years or close to that. What we did is we did the redlining, okay? Don't forget that we were assigned an attorney to work with our board. We were 11 members. They hired an attorney for us, and the attorney had done a lot of public policy for communities all over the state. I can't remember the attorney's name. Now, when we finally got the final draft done, that was submitted to the city council, and then that was placed on the ballot for the voters to accept in its entirety as it was, okay? But that was that one time when we started the process. Now you're absolutely right. We'd have to say there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 amendments. These are what the charter committee recommends to the council. The council approved it. You can vote up yes or no on each one of these. Just for example, let's just say one of the amendments is we're going to go from 4 city councilors to 15, okay? They either take that or not, yes or no. That's as simple as it gets. If yes wins, we have 15 councilors, the wording's already there. For the next election, that's how we elect 15 councilors. So that's the way I see us going through this process. I think we get the completed document after public input in the community, however we decide to do it. The completed document is there of all the changes we asked for, and then outlined as each amendment that is going to be changing the existing charter. Does that make sense?
It does. And the language has got to be self-explanatory. We cannot put in language that people are not going to understand. You know, we have a lot of elderly people, and if we start putting in language that they just can't comprehend, and I'm not saying by any means that we don't have, intellectual people. It's that sometimes when it becomes lengthy, you lose them. You lose, and they say, I don't even want to deal with this. And therefore, they're not going to vote yes or no. So if we can, watch the language in there.
I agree with you. I think that the language should be succinct and in layman's terms.
Right.
Right. When you write clearly and succinctly and in plain terms, it put lawyers out of jobs because there's something to interpret.
Yeah. Very true.
I have a list of people who are going to go into unemployment there, but with that, I really appreciate that thought on that process. That's exactly what we need to do, and that's exactly the way that I had perceived that this should move forward. Getting back to my original question, what's the process for review? So we have how many sections in our current charter?
10, is it?
I believe it's 10. We take it section by section and try to get to this. There's 10 articles in the current charter, excluding a preamble. We could even look at that. But I think that we can go through these fairly quickly. And in those areas that we really need to think about, where there is a substantive change to take place, then we really consider each and really weigh the language and the process that we go through. Because there's areas within this charter that I think are fine. But there's areas that I do think we need to look at. What I'd like to do is kind of bring forth a thought on the review process itself and get some input from you. What are your thoughts on the review process? How should we approach the review?
I think it's important to go through all of it so that we know that we are all on the same page. And if we have no questions on a specific part, then let's move on to the next one. You know, that way we're clear of do you agree with this? Do you not agree with it? If there's no disagreement, then move on to the next one.
And I'm not sure.
You want an article by article review. If there's no changes, then there's no changes.
Then go on. Just, look through them and say, on Article 1, are there questions? Does anybody have anything, that they want, even if it's a specific point? Even if it's language that is not self-explanatory, maybe, there's something in the language that might be backwards or doesn't make sense, then at that point, say, well, I like the article, but it needs to say such and such, or add such and such, or delete such and such. I don't know. Greg probably had a question.
Right, and all I was going to say too is going through each article in order would help us. I don't know if there's any overlap right now in this charter. Sections could overlap, and it'll help us identify it and go with the flow that was originally intended, or we could modify that flow.
Right.
Right.
And there could be a reason why it's in 2 sections.
Exactly. We need to figure that out and clear it up, make it more streamlined.
Yeah.
Right. Can I just put this out?
Of course.
If we go strictly section by section, we're going to be to some degree flying blind on things that are nowhere in the charter but may need to be.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. For example, there's nothing in the charter as far as how the charter itself is enforced. And for the last 11, 12 years since the charter was enacted, the governing body of multiple administrations has failed to fully comply with the charter. So that's something that's nowhere in there that maybe we need to brainstorm where it would fit in. How we get from just, a list of thou shalt nots and thou shalts to do it or else.
Or the consequences to it.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's where I see, Francisco, we're going to need some legal advice to see where that would land up. Does it go to municipal court? Does it go to district court? What's the process if it's not enforced, and who does it? Does it go to attorney general? Is somebody appointed? There's got to be a process. And I don't even think we brought that up at all, Lee. So you're absolutely correct. And I think what's happened, we've suffered because there's no way of enforcing it.
Well, nobody can foresee the future of what was to come. And we're at this point where, we can make those inserts into it or changes or something to it, it probably was something that was never thought of what could happen if it wasn't enforced.
I think that those are you raised some really valid and interesting points. Here's the question that I would have, Matt. Okay, so you mentioned you had a counsel or an attorney to guide you through the process and look at the background and the legality of any proposed change. here's where I have a problem. We have one attorney for the city, but he in effect de facto represents the body and the mayor, or the body in total, whether it be the mayor, the executive branch and the legislative branch. So I could kind of see that in a bit of a conflict. If we propose changes, it would be conflicting to what they're thinking. So with that, maybe we do need to request and see if we can either hire or contract or employ outside counsel.
Is there monies for that?
I don't know.
And probably for advice.
It would probably be for advice and process. So if that's the case, we may need to approach the council for a budget for that. Is there? And that, Sandra, that's what we'd ask. Do we have a budget? Are there funds for that purpose and process?
Because
If
it was
there's not, we're gonna have
my
to-
understanding that Aaron Scott, right? That's his name. I get mixed up with his name. That he would be the advisory, but I agree. Then he'd have a conflict of interest.
Well, only
representing the
because
mayor
he is in the charter. His position is listed in the charter. So it
So
would be kind of like a conflict of interest because, you know, he is the personnel of the city. So I think it would be a conflict.
and maybe that's something that needs to be addressed also.
Mhm.
Now,
Right.
Mr. Chair, let me ask a question of Darlene. Darlene, do you have access to the notes and information that was gathered back when we put this charter together? Like who was the attorney, who the members of the board were, that kind of stuff? Do you have notes of it? Because the city gave us a secretary, and it was George Fidel's daughter. What's her name?
Oh, Gloria?
Gloria was our secretary, but I can't remember the attorney's name.
I think it was Danelle Smith at the time.
No, it was not.
No?
No,
Wasn't she part of the charter commission? Wasn't she?
no,
No?
she was. She actually went to court on behalf of somebody to go after the charter, and the charter won.
Ah, okay.
The charter commission won. So they challenged us.
I'm sure we could get those notes, Matt, and we can get what you need.
I'm sure there's minutes. that would
There's
be-
record of it somewhere. City clerk should have record of it.
And then I don't know if it was Monheimer, the attorney that lives there on 8th Street next to Dave Romero. I think he may have had some input, or his firm or somebody. But one of them offered municipal advice to our charter commission. Don't forget, there's not a lot of home rule communities in the state. And we're probably in the minority. We're probably less than 15 or 20%. So home rule, I think a lot of people don't realize, the city of Las Vegas, that kind of a charter, has the authority to do stuff above and beyond what state government allows normal cities to do. So it was a pretty comprehensive discussion. I just don't.
With that, Darlene, if you could find out if we could get that information, regarding the former charter commission, and then we could explore that possibility. In the meantime, Darlene, could you see if we could pose a question, I guess, through the attorney to the council regarding, if we have a budget, or if we could, if need be, secure the services of an attorney for review. If we could ask that of you to ask, pose that.
And Scott was here, present with me now for a few minutes, so he heard your questions and your concerns.
Okay, so if he could pose that, and we could get an answer perhaps by the next meeting, then we could find out how we would proceed along those lines.
Okay.
I think it would be helpful to us, because there may be some questions that are legal in nature that we don't have the resources within the commission to answer, and to answer with any legal responsibility.
Okay.
With that, so I take it then that we'd like to review article by article and proceed in that fashion. Now, And I don't want to attach an article to an agenda. Because we may get through several articles, if there's no changes, we may get through several in one day and then hit a roadblock at a discussion of another one. So I don't want to assign a calendar date to the review of each article. We proceed article by article, starting from the preamble in Article 1 through Article 10 in an orderly fashion.
But you can put it on the agenda every time that we're meeting and saying review of charter, review of charter. It leaves it open for you to discuss as many as you want or only one.
Well, having the discussion now on how we are to proceed, we at least set that we're going through it in an orderly fashion, and we're going to proceed that way. And we can, as you suggest, Christine, just say a review of the charter at the meeting. With possible revision, discussions of revision.
Right.
If we leave it general in that fashion, we could get through a number of articles in a timely fashion. The thing here is, if we look at the time that we have remaining, and if we were to do something like public hearings, it's going to take up some time. So I can see us meeting on a monthly, as regularly scheduled, as Darlene has placed on the calendar. But I can also see us possibly having special meetings or public hearings as special meetings in order to expedite the process. I'd like to move through this as fast and as efficiently as we can, because I don't think all of us have 10 months in our schedule that we'd like to be doing this. And we have other things to do, but that way we can proceed in an orderly and somewhat quick fashion. Not that we wouldn't be able to reserve time for due diligence on those pieces that have to be revised.
Right.
So with that, that's what I'd like to proceed with. And Darlene, if we could do it that when we notice that we were going to proceed with a review of the charter meeting by meeting with discussion of possible revisions. And that would be the title of that particular item on the agenda. And that way we don't have to notice that we're on Article 5, Section 6, or whatever, every meeting. We don't have to do that. We have a general heading for our review process. And that's why I wanted to discuss this. And thank you for hearing me out on this. I think if we could proceed in a good fashion that way, and then the notice brought forth to the public, and they know when we're meeting and what we're doing. It's a simple thing, but these days we're in a litigious society where people like to challenge everything, including the color of your hair. With me, they could have a field day. But with that, anything else as far as charter review? Is there anything else on the analysis of charter language that should be brought forth at this time?
Well, the language is very legally, written. So there's a lot of stuff you can't take out because I'm assuming that's very normal for any sort of charter for any city.
It seems very, very standard city charter language. But that's what we're here for, is to, as members of the commission, is to take apart each word if we have to and analyze its impact on the body itself. And that's what we have to analyze, is what impact does this word have on the city council, the mayor, and the judge? And how does it impact life within our community? Those are the larger questions that we have to answer within this colorful language that's contained. Is how do we do that, and how do we effect a change that's going to positively impact this community? And our purview and our discussions should be frank as to what is not working and what can we do to make it work more efficiently to serve the greater good of the community. That's what our charter is for. That's what our mission is. And that's the way I view our mission, is what language impacts us as a community, and how can, if it's stymied, what do we do to correct? and bring it forward to positively impact. And it's a big task to do that. But we have seen, as I mentioned in our discussions last time, we've seen areas, and we all agreed that there was areas that needed to be revisited. We know there's problems, and Lee brought one up. How do you do enforcement? How do you make sure they do what they're going to do? Is it working? Is the form of government working? Is the relationship between mayor and council, between mayor and judge, between council and judge, is that working? And those are the items and questions that the charter should address. And I think that's our purview here.
Well, I like the point that, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, sir, but how do we know that there's not something in there that should be in there? And I liked that, how do we know? You know, there's something out here that's not in here, but how do we know it should be in there? I mean, what things have been brought up that people felt that need to be in the charter?
And Lee, I think that question is
Yes.
addressed to you. How do we know what's not there, what's there?
Well, I would say that that's not going to be found in the charter, obviously. I think that happens with retrospection on our last 10 years as a city institution and those things that have gone sideways, and are asking, is that addressed in the charter? And if not, how do we address it? We've had enough life experience with the city to know at least a number of things that have gone terribly wrong over the last decade. And if we can formulate some sensible ideas to prevent those from happening in the future, I think we're going to be golden.
Well, see, and that's where you get, this is where you get your public input. They're going to let you know what should or what was working, what's not working. If you really get the city or the public involved, you'd be surprised how much input is given to you on probably things that they didn't think of 20 years ago. You know, so it's going to make that, it's all by trial and error. Everything that is going to be reviewed is, should it be there? Should it not be there? Is it legal? Is it not legal? And you're going to do what's best for the city of Las Vegas. And so are the people that, you know, when you have your community input and that, they may come up with things that you never even think of that should be there, you know?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Matt.
I love the discussion that you all are bringing up, because it brings up so much now of what we went through in the initial draft of the current charter. Now, when we got our attorney that represented just the commission, the charter commission, he came with a framework already of all the things we needed to have, okay? But don't forget, he was an attorney that specialized in public policy. So, you know, he pointed out, this is a mayor, council, manager form of government. This is a manager, council form of government. You know, all the different types of governments that there were available. Las Vegas had what was called a special charter initially. When the two towns got together, they weren't a home rule, they weren't a special anything. They were, according to the state Secretary of State's office, Las Vegas had a special charter because they consolidated two communities, okay? 1970s when that happened. So then when we decided to become a home rule community, that was a big question. Do we want to do that? And the reason we landed up being a home rule community is because it gave the community a lot of flexibility for economic development reasons, or community development reasons, where if the state law required X, we could modify it and make our own Y, you know, that type of thing. We could make things that are going to be just for Las Vegas. So I think I'm sort of making another argument that we sort of need a municipal community policy, public policy attorney to help us address some of these changes. If not at the onset, at least at some point towards the end, that we can modify our amendments to make sure that they comply. And I'm sure Lee, back in the day, he probably felt normally any charter has an issue, this is the process you go to enforce. But we wouldn't have known, we're just lay people, we're just community people. So he brought together a framework. That's why we have 10, 10 parts to this
Article.
thing because he brought a framework of how this is supposed to be. So I love the discussion we're having because it just now starting to bring back some of the discussion we had back in the day. And it took a year. It was 1 year long.
With that, so Matt, was that the last time the charter was revisited, to your knowledge, was 20 years ago?
When we did it, whatever date's on the charter, I can't remember the day anymore, but it's been a while.
The
it's
current
probably-
charter was written a little
less
over
than
10
20.
years ago.
No, it's more than that.
Was it more than that?
Yeah.
This is 2012. March 19th, 2012.
When was Tony Marcus mayor? That's when we did it.
2008, somewhere around there.
Maybe I would say that. That's probably reasonable.
The charter of the city of Las Vegas was adopted by the voters of the city of Las Vegas, New Mexico at a special municipal election held on March 2nd, 2010.
Okay, so 10 years ago. Well, 11.
11, yeah.
11 years ago. Well, in those 11 years, we've had a couple of administrations. Because Alfonso signed this, and since we've had Alfonso and Mayor Gurule, and now we're into our third administration. And Sandra, this is maybe one can answer that question. What do we need to change? How do we do it? Now is the time to look and see what went wrong in those three administrations or is going wrong, and how do we fix it? That's the simple way of approaching this. Now, if, as Lee is suggesting, something's not here, if we see something in some other community that's working, that say, hey, maybe that'll work here, and we want to try it, or we want to suggest that the city go that way, then that's when we do the additional thing. As we get to amendment to amendment, that's why I say we have to do a pretty concise review of the amendment of the article to see if it's working or not. If it's working, let's move on. If it's not, what do we need to change, and what examples, or how can we change it? Are there examples of it working better? Is there a better mousetrap somewhere? I think those are the things that would make this process go simply. So those are, if we're going to add, we add, but where and how does it affect the current charter?
So Matt, is this the same document that you worked on?
The one that's currently approved, yes.
Yeah, Matt is named on the Charter Commission that worked
There was
on
11 members.
2012. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6.
No, we worked in 2009 or 8 or 9, and it was approved in 2010, right, Lee?
Yes, March 2nd.
So, and I guess what I'm asking is that I think you'd probably be the most pertinent person here, looking through the charter, going through each item, what has worked and what hasn't. You would be, that little fly on the wall could tell us something that that happened and says, well, I remember this. And so maybe with each section, Francisco, okay, Matt, does this sound like, it was doable? Did anything happen that you think shouldn't have happened?
Well, I guess what before I answer that, Francisco, pardon me 1 second, but I really want the input of the entire commission.
I'm just saying this is a document you worked on.
I may know some.
10,
I may know some discussion items that we had.
So 11 years have passed, and in that time, someone said we've had 3 different administrations. Within those 3 administrations, what has worked with these articles? At least it's something.
Yeah, it was interesting, but you know what? We reviewed charters from other communities in New Mexico. Okay, so we saw what Albuquerque had and Santa Fe had, and some of the more aggressive communities down south. All of the communities that are growing at the time, we reviewed all of their charters. That's why we became a home rule community. So the towns that were growing, like Rio Rancho and Las Cruces, Roswell at the time was growing. All of these, we were reviewing all of these other charters to try to put together the best that we could do for our community. The thing is that it was designed to be reviewed after so many years. And actually, it may say 10 years now, but I think at some point, somebody wanted to review it as early as 4 years after we had adopted it. And you have to sort of continue to review this document, because we knew since the very beginning, this is not perfect.
Right.
I think-
Actually, the first review was supposed to happen in 5 years. And
Never
we're
happened.
5 years out from that now, actually more than 5 years.
Yeah, 6, yeah.
So what,
Okay.
Sandra, to kind of, if I could couch your question, perhaps it would be best asked of Matt is what was the intent of the framers of this charter, and then review if we matched the intent or we were able to hit that intent. And if not, then how can we use that
Right.
to revise for a positive or an advancement of that article? I think that would be a good question to ask. And where are we right now? You know, because we should have had the review at 5. We didn't. We're it.
Yeah.
So we're at a critical juncture now because we've seen and experienced some problems. And all of us know, I'm sure that all of us know what we've seen and what's been problematic. And those articles where we find them, those will be the areas of pertinent discussion. Because if we're going to revise, we want to discuss every facet of why, how, and what failed, what will work, or we think will work, what has worked somewhere else. And if this was modeled, then we could use Matt's knowledge to say, well, this is modeled after this, and they did it this way, and this is why it failed here.
Yeah.
I think
Well-
that would make us a stronger board or
Yeah.
commission in doing that, in doing a real analysis and a critical analysis of the failures and even the positives of the charter.
And just listening to you, I'm not a politician, but obviously all of you have been involved with the city, and just listening to you, I'm sure each
I'm
one
not a
of you
crook.
can tell, know little things that have happened, and so that's tremendous information right there. It really is.
We're fortunate to have Matt sitting on this commission with us because we could revisit what was the intent of that article, and that we're fortunate.
The neat thing, Francisco, is first of all, the intent was one thing, okay?
Yeah.
But then the reality of what we've seen has become something else.
Right.
So the neat thing about it is we all have a chance and an opportunity to change the intent plus the reality and come up with something that works.
And Matt, that comes to enforcement. That
Yes.
comes to enforcement.
Yeah.
We have nobody to enforce what this document says.
And that's one of the areas that Lee brought up. There's no stick. There's really no enforcement of the articles within the charter. If they haven't reviewed this in 5 years, and they should have, what should have triggered that review? That's a simple question. The first right out of the chute, well, why wasn't this reviewed?
Well, one of the things we have going on that hasn't been complied with is in the ethics and conflict of interest section, there was a nice little paragraph that was dynamite that was called enforcement. And the city council was tasked with implementing an ordinance that would enforce the terms of the conflict of interest and ethics section of this charter with fines and penalties attached. And son of a gun, over the last 11 years, what has the city council managed to overlook? Administration after administration is enacting the ordinance that is required. It's not discretionary. That would hold them accountable for their misdoing if they did engage in it. So because of that, we have an ethics board that is, there's nothing for them to enforce. It's almost pointless to have that board without enacting the ordinance that would empower them and give them both the responsibility and the power to oversee and investigate. So how do you it's a problem that bites its own tail, because if they enacted that ordinance, we would have about 90% of the enforcement happening with this city charter. But if they refuse to do it and we don't have a way to make them do it, around and around we go. Sorry.
Well, but you know what? The neat thing is we can do that. Because we're not the elected officials, we can stipulate what the fines could be.
Well, it's always hard to self-enforce or self-regulate. So you came up with a charter which enacted an ethics board to oversee the enforcement that was never organized and then chartered in itself. So then you have no enforcement.
Exactly.
It's a pretty simple thing, but what we need to do is look at how do we get the body to implement that portion of the charter? What's the stick there to provide for enforcement? And that's a good question that we'll visit when we get to that portion of the charter. But it's something that is very important. Lee,
I think Matt was proposing an alternative approach that we actually incorporate, and we'd have to find out if we can do that legally so that it's enforceable in municipal court. But if rather than relying on the city council to enact the ordinance that would hold them accountable, we build that language directly into, I think it's Chapter 9, the Ethics and Conflict of Interest section.
Well, there's a problem there in itself. If you have three bodies within the city that the charter recognizes and basically establishes, which are the administrative, the office of the mayor, or the executive, the legislative, and the council, and the municipal judge, do you give that stick to the municipal judge? It's in turn bound by the charter. It doesn't make any sense. Do we do an external court? Do we do an external office? How do you do that? Those are questions we have to visit. Well, how do we enforce that provision and assure that the council is going to then go ahead and abide by its own charter? There's nothing really there, and that's a problem.
Well,
overseen and overarching problems to this charter.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and I can tell you, it's obvious that during the last 11 years, that has been a problem. There's been a lot of issues that have come up with no process to enforce. Literally, that's one of our I think I would consider one of our key roles on this commission.
Right.
To take care of that loophole, because we can't leave it like that. You know what I mean? So you have a charter, the community voted for it, expects it to be enforceable, and it's not. So
It can't be a
need to take care of
document that is put up on the shelf. It can't be. It has to be something, it should be the city's Bible. This charter should be the city's Bible to run effectively, responsibly, and ethically. That's what this is for. That is owed to the citizens of Las Vegas. It is owed to them that all this charter is enforced in the manner it was presented. That's my opinion.
Well, you
I
hit
agree.
on something, Christine and Matt and all of you, we're on the same page. In discussions that I've had with citizens, that is the first thing. Well, they can do whatever they want to.
Exactly.
It's we don't have now the city. It's all, and we've all heard it, and we all know it, and we all hear it every day in our northern New Mexico parlance. It's a otra movida.
That's why we have lost so many citizens.
Get all
That's
over
why we have lost so many citizens in Las Vegas. We are becoming a very, very small community, and it shouldn't be that way. We have so much enrichment here and so much that we can offer, and everybody's afraid of everybody. And it shouldn't be that way. It should be where you have your opinion, the next person has their opinion. How can we work through it together and be able? And I know a lot of the time people say it's all talk, just like you just said, Francisco. But in reality, it is us that is going to make that decision on these pieces of paper that is going to either we as this commission make sure that the governing body enacts and make sure that they follow.
You're exactly on point. And I think when you see it at the top level and you see the enforcement of the charter and the council abiding by the charter, it flows all the way down through the bottom. Because right now in this city, we have problems from code enforcement to the way that the city council acts. Every facet of city government is affected by the city charter. But people don't recognize it as having the effect of being the structure for a well-balanced, well-oiled machine. We're not. Excellent discussion. With that, in order to move on, because we know we now have a construct for how to approach a review. Article by article, meeting by meeting. If we need an extra special meeting, we'll call it. If we need a public hearing, we'll call it and notice it and then move forward if and when the time calls for it. So with that, on the announcement, I think this is a lively discussion. I really enjoy hearing each of you bring lots to the table. With that, I'll close the analysis of the charter language discussion item and move on to other business. Is there other business at this time before the commission? Greg, you had mentioned you had a question.
I do, actually. Since we're working on behalf of the city and the public in general, I was wondering, should we be sworn in?
Well, if
there will be others who may come before us, and there is a provision for those people to be sworn in by this commission. Shouldn't we also be sworn in?
Well, you can't swear in anybody if you haven't been sworn in yourself. And if the provisions of a public hearing call for a swearing in of witnesses and making them officially a part of the process and the proceedings, then someone or all of us should be sworn into our respective offices as commissioners.
This is a discussion that's been had in the context of the city council in the past. And it turns out that not everybody, yes, once it rises to the level of a quasi-judicial proceeding, as with our zoning board, et cetera, and we're having fair hearings, then people have to be sworn in. It's actual testimony, and only certain people under state statute can do that. And I believe the city attorney is not one of those people. That would probably fall to the city clerk.
And in order to...
Yes, I agree with you. I can confirm with city clerk though on that.
And the official to swear in would either be the clerk or the municipal judge or another person in a judicial capacity. So Darlene, if you could find out that process, and then if we have to be sworn in, we'd make that as part of the official notice. It would be the swearing in of the commission at that point. And we should proceed with that sooner rather than later.
Yes, definitely. I will check with the city clerk and confirm with her what, if you guys need to be sworn in or how that process would work.
Yeah, and just pose the question: if we're to conduct public hearings and swear in witnesses, then we should be have been sworn in and swear to uphold the Constitution and the Charter of the City of Las Vegas.
And it gives credence to this organization. It gives credence to everything that you're going to put down on this paper. That, we are sworn, we're going to do our best, and this is what we came up with. I think it just adds a little bit more.
Yeah, and actually,
I agree.
Mr. Chairman, Craig brings up a good point, but as a city councilor or a mayor, when you're having a city council meeting, you're there to conduct the city's business. But once you say you have a public meeting and you're opening it up, that's when we were swearing in people to testify on behalf of a zone change or against it or whatever. If they were going to have any discussion, they had to be sworn in. And sometimes the attorneys do it in a hurry, or the clerk did it in a hurry, and you didn't realize what was going on. But you were literally testifying that you were going to tell the truth, and
Yeah.
that, the information that you were going to provide was going to make a difference in the discussion. And then after the vote's taken, okay, in the public hearing process, then the city councilor and mayor sort of take off that hat and go back to governing, and that's how that would continue. But we did take testimony in the last process for the charter commission that we did in all the wards. So more than likely, we'll be taking testimony from the general public.
And I think that would call for us to be sworn in as commissioners. So Darlene, if you could find out from the city clerk, and if she agrees, then perhaps the next meeting is that one of the action items would be the swearing in of the commission.
Okay.
Thank you. Other business, what I'd like to bring up at this time is we were all presented with bylaws by Scott had prepared them. I know that he sent them to everybody. Have you reviewed the bylaws, and not to take action, but to discuss those bylaws at this time under other business, and to bring them up as an action item for adoption at the next meeting after they've been properly noticed? Does anybody have any heartache with those bylaws?
No.
They seem pretty standard.
I think we need to probably adopt them at the next meeting. I'll go back and review them again. But I had a question in regards to one of these. Now, are we 7 members or 6?
We're supposed to be 7.
Darlene, have you heard anything from Stephen?
I know that he was having some sort of conflict, and he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to serve on the commission. I haven't heard anything back from him, so I'll check on that today, and I'll see where we're at.
If we could have that some type of an answer for him, if he's able to serve on the commission, and if not, perhaps then we should return. I don't know who appointment he was, but them have him appoint an alternate to fill that position, so we can proceed with a full commission.
Yes, sir. I'll check with the city manager's office. Loretta Abreu is handling the boards and commissions and stuff, so I'll check with her and see if she's heard anything as well.
Thank you. Yeah, you could answer that.
Because literally right now, Mr. Chair, he's already got one unexcused absence, right? Today's our first official meeting.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's not that we're trying to put him on the spot. If he's not able to do it for a conflict, let's get somebody on this, because we don't want to be told later, you guys knew there was a vacancy and didn't take care of it.
I agree, and if you would answer that, Darlene, and then perhaps they could have the body that appointed, whether it was the council or the mayor, appoint someone in his stead if he can't serve, in the event that he was unable to serve. Because I think we do need to fill that position, because there's 6. If we have a tie vote, we'd be in limbo.
Yeah.
So we want to avoid any question that may arise from that absence.
Okay.
With that, do we have anything else as far as those bylaws as they were presented, the draft bylaws?
So we had mentioned that we are not a full-time commission, and Article 5 says that we had brought this up earlier about staggered terms. Do we still want to have that language in there?
Well, that would keep us on for 4 years. I don't know if that, and Darlene, perhaps that needs clarification from Scott Ahrens. Are we bound to 4 years in our term of service, or is our term of service through the revision of the current charter? It could be stated in those terms so that it gives us an endpoint. So we'd end at the adoption or the rejection of the charter by the electorate.
Yes, we can confirm with Scott on that. But you guys are correct. You're serving more as like an ad hoc committee type of thing, because you're on there just to serve a purpose. Once you're done with that certain mission, then it's completed. So,
Okay, so we have a question on Article 5 then, if that is a valid as to terms of service within the bylaws. And if we can have an amendment to the bylaws by the next meeting, then we could adopt. Is there any other thing that in those bylaws, the draft bylaws, that anybody saw?
Well, I'm still back on what we were talking about. We can't overlook that the governing body has a duty, a non-discretionary duty to establish the duration of this commission. And they need to make that call, and they need to make it in an open meeting.
Right.
Not to sound bossy, but there it is in black and white.
And see, that's the reason I was asking about the terms, because it's not clarifying.
Good point.
Yeah.
Well, let's present that to Scott, and then if there's a question, and if you're correct, and I think you are, then have the body, the city council, adopt the term of service for the commission. And I would suggest that the language would be somewhere as to the duration through the proposition to the electorate. In other words, after the election, then our term of service would end. Because if they don't adopt, and we still have to revisit to present another adoption, we'd still be on the hook. So it would be through the adoption or rejection. If it's a rejection, then we would end either way, and they would appoint another commission.
I would recommend that what we do as a charter commission is we send the city council 2 action items. We'll get it to the city manager. He can put it in the agenda. And the first one would be the term of service for this commission. They have to vote, 1 year, whatever the term is. And then actually the second item that I'd recommend us consider is that the city council afford this commission access to an attorney.
Right.
And I don't think we should we should give that burden to Darlene, because she's already worked for an attorney. It puts her sort of in an awkward position. Although we have been endorsed by the city council to serve as a commission for the charter review, I think it's up to us to ask for those 2 items to be placed in the next council agenda.
Before we get there, because we need to take action on this, and in order to take action, it has to be noticed. Why don't we place those on as an action item on our next meeting agenda, to formulate a question to council through the manager, and we form the questions, and then formally adopt them as an action item to be taken to the manager to council.
That's correct. That's fine.
Press them with an action item that we cannot proceed on adoption of bylaws until we have action by the council. So that would require an action item at our next meeting. So I propose, Darlene, if we could have this addressed as an action item at the next meeting, is the question of term of service and the question of legal
Representation.
at the next, for action at the question and the action item on our next meeting.
yes, sir.
That way we're on record as taking action on it, because right now it's under other business and we couldn't take action to even present it.
Right.
And I hate to be so parliamentary about this, but let's follow the rules on this.
Yes. And for clarity, we're not actually taking action at the current meeting, as that would be defined in the Open Meetings Act, because that would be a boo-boo.
Yeah.
We are under the item other business right now. And we're bringing it up as other business to be considered for action at the next meeting. So we fall under the Open Meetings Act concept. So we're not in violation of anything. We've got to be very careful, because I sit in an institution that seems to take the Open Meetings Act for granted at times. Well, we'll move on from there.
Well, let me just offer one more bit of information. Hopefully the city of Las Vegas has a budget item somewhere, probably in the general fund, for the ability to hire an attorney for us. They may even have some on contract, but I think we need to be more specific. We need a firm or attorney that, number one, does public policy. Their specialty is this charter. It's this kind of stuff. I'm sure we could get someone that's local, has done X, Y, and Z, but we really want somebody who's maybe worked on charters in the state of New Mexico.
With expertise within that administration, with a charter or public policy administration. We can formulate that question and have it fairly concise to the council at our next meeting when we formulate and actually take action on that item. But that's a good point.
The request goes to the mayor or manager. Has to go to both.
We would have to go to the manager then to the council. If the council is going to set terms of service.
The council will set terms of service in a vote, but the action item to be put on the agenda goes to the mayor and manager.
Yes, exactly. And they would propose it toward the legislative body.
And just for background, attorneys, including city attorneys, conflict out all the time. Recruitment and contracting of outside attorneys at the city is the wallpaper. It happens more frequently than you would think.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. With that, is there any other business that we need to entertain at this point?
The only thing I have is what color is the hair of the chairman? He said earlier that we couldn't figure it out. What color is it?
Well, it depends on the day. If I do have hair and I haven't pulled it out.
Just joking.
With that, if there's no other business for the commission at this time, Darlene, I think we've given a couple items to place on the agenda for the next meeting. And we do have the next meeting scheduled for, I believe it's April 8th.
I think it's the 1st.
Or the April 1st? How appropriate, April Fool's Day.
Auspicious.
April 1st.
Okay, so it's April 1st. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn at this point and re-adjourn on April 1st. Do I have a motion?
Second the motion.
Do we have a motion? You had a second, you didn't have a motion.
Yeah,
So I take that as a motion.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
You
Yeah,
better
second.
put attention there, Francisco.
He's
Who
not
moved
putting
what?
attention.
Who moved what where?
Put attention.
Put attention.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned at this time. Thank you all. Excellent discussion, lively. Thank you, and I appreciate serving on this board with all of you, but I think we're going to have fun on this.
I'm
Have a
learning.
great
fun.
week,
I'm learning
everybody.
a lot.
Before everybody
Stay safe.
real quick, guys,
Thank you, Darlene.
Bye, darling.
real quick, I have a question.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Do you guys have a copy of the current charter?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Well, I have, yes.
The one
Is
that's
that the
online.
first one that was sent?
The one